12 men entered the land of Canaan, and 40 days later they returned. They had seen fertile lands and valleys. They had seen fortified cities. They had seen powerful kingdoms, but none of those became the center of their report. Instead, one word spread fear throughout all the camp: giants. The spies claimed they felt like grasshoppers in comparison. And that raises a question that fascinates not just me, but historians, researchers, and Bible readers for centuries. Who were the giant tribes of Canaan? And were they connected to the mysterious Nephilim mentioned before the flood? This is where our investigation begins. When most people think about biblical giants, they think about one name: Goliath. But long before David ever even stepped into a battlefield, the land of Canaan was already associated with giants. In fact, the deeper I looked into the story, the stranger it became. The Bible doesn't describe just one giant people. It mentions several different names: the Anakim, the Rephaim, the Emim, the Zamzummim, and different locations, but all connected by reputation for unusual size, strength, and power. That immediately raises another question for me. Why were there so many giant tribes concentrated in one region? The story begins in chapters number 13. Moses sent 12 spies into Canaan, and their mission was simple: survey the land, observe the people, and return with a report. At first, the report sounded encouraging. The land was fertile, the crops were plentiful, the future looked promising. But then came the part everybody remembered: the giants. The spies reported seeing the descendants of Anak, and they described themselves as grasshopper in comparison to size. Imagine hearing that. An entire nation waiting to enter the promised land, only to hear that giants stood in their way. And suddenly the mystery becomes much more personal. Who were these people that inspired so much fear? Now, among all the giant tribes mentioned in the scripture, the Anakim are probably the most famous. The spies specifically connected them to the Nephilim, and that connection has fueled debate ever since. Were the Anakim actually descendants of the Nephilim, or were the spies simply comparing them to legendary giants of the past? The Bible records what the spies said, but it doesn't fully explain the relationship. And that's where the mystery begins to deepen, because the Anakim were not alone. Other giant peoples appeared throughout the region as well. The Rephaim appeared repeatedly throughout the Old Testament, and so did the Emim and the Zamzummim. These groups are often described as powerful peoples who once occupied parts of the land. What's fascinating is the scripture preserves their names. Most ancient tribes disappear into history, but these groups continue to be remembered. Why? What made them different? What made them so unforgettable? And maybe most importantly, were they all connected, or were they entirely separate peoples who happened to share a similar reputation? Now here's the part that fascinates me even more. All 12 spies saw the same land. They saw the same cities, the same giants, the same obstacles. but they reached completely different conclusions. 10 spies looked at the giants and saw defeat. Joshua and Caleb looked at the giants and saw a challenge that could be overcome. Again, why? The evidence was identical, but the difference was how they interpreted it. And maybe that's one reason this story has endured for thousands of years. Because it's not just about giants. It's also about fear and faith, and how people respond to overwhelming obstacles. Generations later, giant figures continue to appear in the biblical record. One of the most famous was King Og of Bashan, a ruler associated with the Rephaim. His bed was so remarkable that Scripture specifically mentions its size, roughly 13 feet by 6 feet. Then, centuries later, another giant emerges, Goliath, the giant everyone remembers. But Goliath wasn't the beginning of the story. He was part of a much older mystery, a mystery stretching back through the giant tribes of Canaan and beyond. And this is where our investigation leads to an unexpected place. Now, most people ask, who were the giant tribes of Canaan? But another question may be even more interesting. What happened to them? The Anakim, the Rephaim, and the others. The giant clans that once inspired fear throughout the land, because over time they seem to fade from history. Why? Were they defeated? Did they absorb into peoples? Or did their identity simply disappear over time? The Bible does record their presence, but it leaves many of the details unanswered. And maybe that's why the mystery continues to fascinate us today. The giant tribes of Canaan remain one of the most intriguing mysteries in the Bible. The spies feared them. The Israelites remembered them. Their names echo through ancient texts. Still, many questions remain. Were they connected to the Nephilim? Why were there so many giant tribes? And why do they seem to vanish from history? The deeper we investigate, the more questions we find. And maybe that's exactly what makes this mystery so compelling. What do you think? Were the giant tribes of Canaan connected to the Nephilim? Or is there another explanation completely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And until next time, like, subscribe, share, and keep searching the ancient archives.